Welcome to the hashtag R6 Prepares podcast. I'm Bill Bischoff, FEMA Region 6 Community Preparedness Officer, and we're going to be talking about community preparedness matters that affect Region 6 states and tribal nations, Arkansas, Louisiana, Oklahoma, New Mexico, Texas, and the tribal nations therein. We hope you enjoy the show.
This hashtag R6 Prepares podcast features the Region 6 Higher Education Collaborative. We started in 2017 when our partners at FEMA headquarters higher education program hosted a summit at the University of North Texas in Denton, Texas. About 35, 36, maybe more colleges and universities from across the region joined for the summit. And afterwards, it was deemed highly successful. Everyone enjoyed the networking and the collaboration, and the decision was made to go ahead and continue it at the regional level. So Region 6 Higher Education Collaborative was born. Over the next couple of years, summits were hosted at the University of Houston by the University of Houston and Texas Southern University. Another one was at the University of Texas, El Paso. Another one at Arkansas Tech University. Everyone has been successful. Again, networking, collaborating has been really strong at each of these. And now we've really picked up some momentum. We've got a lot of new blood joining us, and we have room for plenty more. Today, we're going to talk to our partners in the Region 6 Higher Education Collaborative Leadership Team and enjoy the show.
Dr. Smith, it is good to see you. We have had a lot happen since we recorded for this podcast. So we're sticking this on the front end. We've got to announce something. Can you tell us what we're announcing?
I'm delighted to. Region 6 Higher Education Collaborative is hosting a summit, Forging the Change, at Arkansas Tech University in Russellville, Arkansas, September 14th and 15th. And we are putting out the call. We want people to register for this event. It's capped at 150, but who do we want to register? We want people who are interested in emergency management. Particularly, we are looking for those who are associated with a higher education program in emergency management, or those who are campus leaders in emergency management on the campus, for campus preparedness, and i.e. the emergency managers of the campus, as well as researchers and academicians, and particularly students. We're interested for this to be an opportunity for us to work together, to network as well. Are you good for me to keep going?
Please do.
To discuss, our overall theme is forging the change, but we're looking at how do we best deal and work with the issues of diversity, equity, inclusion, and access. What does that look like? How do we make certain that we are best preparing our communities and serving our communities? And our communities are made up of all different kinds of people. And so we want to be able to do that best. We're also looking at
who have we got facilitating for us? Because I know we've got some great folks coming in.
Yes, we've got Drs. Dee Dee Bennett Gale and Dr. Alessandra Hollerman, who will be leading us through some exercises regarding diversity, equity, and inclusion. And then CERT, we've got some folks who are going to be presenting their research in regards to CERT. Somebody who's going to be speaking, and I'm looking at you, Bill, you're going to be part of that, presenting about community preparedness with CERT, as well as youth preparedness camps. Then also looking at critical infrastructure and cybersecurity. And so we've got several speakers who are coming to share about that. Then, of course, the biggest part of being collaborative is that we collaborate. We share with each other what's happening in our communities. And we are looking forward to our partners across Region 6 sharing what's going on in their area and how we can best collaborate with each other.
Oh, I'm looking so forward to this. And we're going to have some information on the screen here shortly, and it's going to share with our viewers and our listeners how to register. And I'm looking forward to seeing you and the rest of our partners at the Region 6 Higher Education Collaborative, September 14th and 15th at Arkansas Tech University in Russellville. Anything else on your end before we move on into the podcast, Dr. Smith?
Not at all, Bill, other than to once again say welcome. We look forward to having you at Arkansas Tech University and being part of this collaborative summit. Thanks.
Thank you. And on with the podcast.
Andy Smith from Northeastern State University in Tahlequah, Oklahoma, Secretary of the Region 6 Higher Education Collaborative, and the Swiss, Swiss Army knife, I think, of emergency management. I believe I know you from another life where you were helping run a youth preparedness camp there at your campus a couple of years ago. So you were one of those folks that seems to find herself across the gamut in emergency management and doing all kinds of things. Welcome. And I'd like to ask you really right off the bat, what is it that would make the Region 6 Higher Education Collaborative valuable to folks like yourself? You're the emergency manager there for the campus at Northeastern State University.
Well, first off, I really like the Swiss Army comment. That's the first time I've ever been referred to as that. So I really appreciate that nickname. I'll have to use that for future on my resumes and on my business cards. No, I'll have to say with our higher ed collaborative, I think the thing that makes it just so valuable is the fact that, well, first off, emergency management isn't very old. We're still trying to find our place. We're still trying to figure out our goals. And obviously not every single department is going to be the same. So I know just in general, we have these discussions on what do we need to do? Where can we advance? Where can we improve? So the fact that we've now entered into this phase where you've got these higher ed institutions that are now becoming part of this world, I feel like the biggest thing about this collaborative is it's providing guidance. It's helping you build these ties, because I know the number one thing I get out of these meetings and out of these collaboratives is I guess in a sense relief, because I'm very new, well, and just in general, very new to this. And I think that's hard for anybody starting out in emergency management, no matter the environment. Obviously, we try to look towards others to kind of collaborate or see, what we need to be doing or what our options and resources are. So every time that we meet or we sit down and discuss, there's just this huge sense of relief that I'm now talking with other individuals that are now facing the same daily issues that I am, or might be facing something that I haven't had to hurdle over yet. So knowing that I've got a group and an outlet where I can sit down and be, hey, like, is anybody else running into this, or does anybody have any thoughts on this? It's nice to know that I can go towards a like-minded group of people and we can actually discuss these and kind of see what can improve one another.
It seems like that value was proven early on, during the pandemic.
Yes.
When it looked like, you reached out, or Carol Walton from the University of Central Arkansas reached out. Y'all found one another to discuss the path forward on bringing folks, students and staff back to the campus, and shared. What did you share with one another and others, I should say?
Well, the number one thing that we kind of discussed was, first off, how are you doing? How are you holding up? Are your gray hairs as bad as mine? No, it was impressive because, this entire time, especially during COVID, it's hard finding time or being able to reach out to these other emergency managers or these other public safety departments and asking them, hey, what are your next steps? Or, hey, what are you planning on doing? Because everyone made decisions differently. Everyone had different groups helping them make these decisions or putting these decisions forward. So I know whenever Carol and I talked, the number one thing was, hey, how are you holding up? And also, how are you operating? Like, what are you doing? And we found it easier just to kind of go through what we kind of put as like an outline. So in regards to, hey, how did you all handle the very beginning? Like, what did you do first? I know whenever we did our short presentation and part of our discussion, our number one thing was
Hang on. When you did this presentation, you're referring to a presentation you and Carol just recently did.
Yes, sorry. Yes.
Education Collaborative. Okay, good. Go ahead.
Yes, so whenever Carol and I presented at our last higher ed meeting or higher ed collaborative meeting, you're taught in emergency management that whenever you come upon an incident or whatever you want to phrase it as, you're supposed to size it up. You're supposed to see how bad is this going to be, or what resources are we looking at that we're probably going to have to attain in the near future. So I know when we first started our conversation, I was like, hey, how did you all respond right when this all began? How did you all size this up? Like, what were your steps? And we kind of went down, like I said, this outline where we looked at how did we handle at the beginning? What were things that we could have, done differently, or things that we know for the future, for the next, I don't want to jinx us and knock on wood, but the next pandemic level, at least to that extent, resource and planning wise. But I know everything that we went through, we had the same end goal, even though we didn't have the same response. And I think that was nice that we were able to sit down and discuss that. And like I said, kind of going back to that sense of relief, it made me feel 10 times better that there was another institution that had to face these struggles. And not that they didn't know what they were doing, but it was nice to know that there were a lot of times where they had to question the situation. They had to figure out, like, what's our best option. And I think when we did this presentation, we're not the exact same size, but I know we're similar. I mean, we're probably a few thousand off. I think it really helped a majority of the group, because you try to mimic what other universities are doing because you're seeing what their plans are. You're trying to match that, because nobody wants to look like the unprepared entity. Nobody wants to be the one that is consistently in the paper or, in the public being like, oh, well, they don't have this available. Because everybody's got different resources. It's a different environment. Again, this is all new for higher education to be included in. So I know when Carol and I sat down and discussed, we made it very clear that we handle things for the most part, on the opposite ends of this pandemic spectrum. So it was nice knowing that just because I didn't do it the same way as her, or she didn't do it the same way as me, that neither of us were in the wrong in our response, but that there were more options out there. And I feel like when we let our group know when we did this presentation, I felt like we had a lot of people that didn't feel as alone, because I know that's the worst feeling at the end of the day is, did I do a bad job? Could I have done better? Am I completely just unbeknownst to this situation, how to handle it? So being able to kind of express that, I think made people, again, sense of relief. I think that's going to be my key word of the day.
If someone's wanting to join the collaborative, who should they email, or where should they go?
I personally, because I've got the contact list, they're always welcome to email me at smith38@nsuok.edu. And that's N as in North, S as in South, U as in Up, O as in Oklahoma, and K as in Key. I always have to do that because I've been told I sound a little bit like Boomhauer, so I don't want my N's and my M's.
All right.
But they're welcome to email me and I'll get them added. And I know I've had a few reach out to me in the last week or so, so I'm excited to have these new members involved, but everyone is welcome. And if they enjoy it, then they're welcome to hang out with us. If not, then I'm happy that they have the opportunity to come and join our meetings.
I believe our numbers have probably tripled in this past year. So I would, you've had a lot of work on you to do to compile everybody and keep the flow going. So again, thank you. And I look forward to talking to you soon. We would be remiss talking about the Region 6 Higher Education Collaborative and the momentum we picked up if we didn't talk to our friend David Leyba, an academic advisor, or
I think you're a reservist who wears many hats, but in the time that I've known you, you've been an academic advisor, and you were the guy that I want to say maybe 8 months ago more called and said, listen, I'm hearing your name when I'm talking to my partners here in colleges and universities. And it sounds like we're going down similar paths, and perhaps we should talk about marshaling our forces. And I was just so glad to hear that, because as a community preparedness officer, the higher education gig is really not in my wheelhouse. It's becoming in my wheelhouse, but it is in your wheelhouse. And you did start moving the people that you were talking to through I guess the disaster and the recovery side of the house over to us. And it's been a great benefit. We've seen our numbers grow, the amount of collaborations growing, and our partners are doing well together and just becoming one big Region 6 higher education collaborative. So, but along the way, you have shared that, you see a recovery and a preparedness blend there that's going to pay off for everybody. So David Leyva, thank you for getting us all together and sharing. But if you could just kind of tell us how it all happened on your end.
Well, Bill, first of all, thank you for having me on this podcast. Sometimes it's better to be lucky than it is to be good. I feel very fortunate. I think if we can step back a little bit and look at the National Disaster Recovery Framework, and if we accept a certain premise, if we accept that there's 4 or 5, depending on who we talk to, the 4 stages of emergency management, recovery is, in my mind, the toughest of them all. I did my graduate work on the recovery of Greensburg, Kansas, and looked at it, 10 years after their recovery, at the 5-year mark and then the 10-year mark, as it approaches its 15-year. So, recovery means a lot of different things to a lot of different people, and different disciplines see it differently. Urban planners see recovery happening in 5 years. Other disciplines see it as a 20-year. So it really just depends. And when I was appointed as the academia advisor in Region 6, you're right, I kept coming across your name in different, and what I realized is that, oh my goodness, a classic case of the same fingers, forget the left and the right hand, the same fingers on the same hand not working together. And since you were permanently assigned to Region 6, I thought it was a no-brainer that I needed to reach out to you before I kept going, and sort of tell you how I saw things, because it wasn't strictly the emergency management fields at the moment that I was being tasked with bringing. I was being asked to help augment the Economic Development Administration and the economists, because we didn't have enough. So the only place I knew to find those in Region 6 were at the universities, and specifically at the business schools. So that's how it's sort of started down that path.
Well, and I think one of the things that really impressed me about you, because I don't have a grants background, and there are very few grants opportunities in FEMA in the higher education program. There are some at the headquarters level, but to my knowledge, we don't have a lot at the regional level grants wise for higher. So I think you're able to spot the grant opportunities, or at least point people in the directions. And like I said, we don't have that background. Where do you see it going for the Region 6 Higher Education Collaborative? The people that you've brought in are already kind of focused on funding for their research. Where do you see the benefit to these folks coming in and joining forces?
Well, I think one of the things is sometimes we can be talking the same thing in a different language, but it's still the same. It's still the same thing. And a lot of these business schools were already doing what we would call long-term economic recovery. They just weren't calling it that. They weren't seeing themselves inside this emergency management phase. So what's interesting is when you bring these two parties together, how they're cousins. They belong in the same room for a number of reasons. It's hard to get an economic impact study done unless you do that type of work. It's hard to look at an economic outlook for 2022 unless you regularly do that. So bringing these two together, in my mind, if I could wave a magic wand, I would love to see a interdisciplinary, multidisciplinary approach to attacking some of the problems and the multiple number of federal agencies that would be willing to fund this work. But there's some areas where it'll be very strong in the emergency management piece. And there's some areas where perhaps emergency management program could use that business background, especially if they can speak the same language. Now, some people say, well, why don't you just go across the campus and talk to the business school and collaborate that way? That is a method of doing it. But unless you're already researching in that space, and I think the key also is that you have a potential funder there. Yeah, I think the opportunity to collaborate is what makes this region. I think the opportunities are endless. Sometimes the weakness of not being near the Beltway hurts you from being able to reach out to the federal entities. But we're bringing the federal entities into the region. They're already here. We're just helping marshal the forces, and they're already saying what they're willing to pay to get funded to be researched on. So if some of that more entrepreneurial programs got together to attack some of the issues that are really prominent in the minds of the federal agencies that are out there, I mean, there's a funder already in place. And one of the things I think that the Interagency Recovery Coordination Cell has done very well is getting all of the known federal grants with notice of sourcing that are out that have a 60-day deadline. So it's not something that's 6 months from now, a year from now, like literally 60 days from now. Get it together, put it together, and you'll get an answer sooner than later. But sometimes when you're not strong in a certain area, but another program is, I mean, this is a wonderful opportunity to attack that. And where the emergency management programs may not, and maybe they do, I don't know, but may not have the programs needed to do an economic impact analysis or an impact study or an economic outlook into 2022. One of the business schools that are now part of the higher ed collaborative can do that, spit it out for you, and in less than a week. So you combine those two, and the possibilities are endless.
I think we're looking at beautiful things in the future, because I think this group lends itself towards collaboration. I mean, it's in the name. So I think we're going to see good things come. And I can't thank you enough, David, for you and your partner, Rosemary Jackson,
Yes.
for bringing everybody to us, because it's just enhanced the group that we have, and things are going to get better as we move along.
I was telling you beforehand, 2008, Paul Krugman, who columnist for the New York Times, he won the Nobel Prize in economics for his work on new trade theory and new economic geography. And everybody said, oh, you're fantastic, you're smart, you're the best. And then a year later, he was a finalist for the Pulitzer. Well, in between that time and after that time, the geographers, stood there and said, there's absolutely nothing new about what you've just talked about. We've been talking about this for 100 years. To his credit, but Krugman gave a speech before the American Association of Geographers in 2010. And he said, look, economists, we read too little from outside our tribe, and we should look over the fence more often to see what others are doing. I think that's what this collaborative has an opportunity to do. Look over the fence and go, I didn't realize you were working on that. So are we. We're in the same state. We could cover this and readily provide who is looking to have their problem solved. Because the federal, as we know, the federal government has its limits of people, resources, but if there's something out there that's a priority to an agency, it's mentioned. It's going to be funded, and there's no reason why this group shouldn't get a lion's share of that effort.
I appreciate you shepherding us into this, and I appreciate your availability for the future because I as a reservist, sometimes you're going to be in different directions, but we already know what's there. So appreciate your partnership and looking forward to working with you in the future. Thank you, David. Good morning, Vic Manjares from the University of Texas, El Paso. Nice to have you with us.
Good morning, Bill.
Can you talk to me today a little bit about your experience with the Region 6 Higher Education Collaborative? If you will, let's start with you hosted a summit there at UTEP. Can you talk to me about that, how that came about and what you got out of it?
No, absolutely. So the R6 Higher Ed Summit that we hosted here in El Paso was at February 2019. And so we were fortunate enough to have a pretty good turnout from the members of the collaborative. So I think we believe we had members from every state within Region 6, multiple universities. For many of the folks that showed up, this was the first time at UTEP, first time on the southern border of the U.S. So it was really neat. It brought an awareness to a lot of folks that showed up, and to UTEP as well. We had many presenters at the UTEP Summit from our engineering department that really had never considered FEMA or emergency management as part of maybe their domain in terms of what they can produce in terms of research. And so I think it was fascinating is one. Second is I've seen, from February 2019 to now, I've seen the work not only in engineering but other domains within the university that have become really interested in emergency management and actually trying to produce solutions to real world problems. So I think that was the biggest benefit that we saw.
Oh, I think so too. And the networking that took place, every one of our summits that we've had the last few years has yielded network folks that make contact and keep contact going forward. And you never know how that's going to play out in the future in terms of research and development. If you will, talk to me a bit about research, because you're the vice chair of our Region 6 Higher Education Collaborative, and everyone, the chair, Sandy Smith of Arkansas Tech University, and our secretary, Andy Smith of Northeastern State University there in Tahlequah, Oklahoma. They kind of have their niches, with Andy having campus preparedness and Sandy being more the higher education for the next generation of emergency managers and where that goes. You have carved out research. Can you talk to us about what's going on, what you think is the path forward for research for the Region 6 Higher Education Collaborative?
Oh, absolutely, Bill. Just to start off with the research, if you consider my background, right, being retired from the Department of Homeland Security and working along the southern border and our headquarters office in Washington, D.C., I never understood or truly appreciated the power of a research university. And oftentimes, the places I was located, we had big research universities in our own backyard. And I never understood how they could be a resource. And so after I retired and started working here at the University of Texas at El Paso, I got a greater appreciation how a research university works, how they go about doing the business. But I realized that researchers, as brilliant as they are, they have a hard time connecting with practitioners. And so my biggest role here on campus is I connect dots, right? I connect researchers with practitioners, try to solve real world problems. And so I really love that aspect of not only my job, but when I look at Region 6 higher ed collaborative effort, because, as you mentioned before, we've got some fantastic people that are training our next generation of emergency management personnel. But I also think just as important is training some of these researchers to look at problem sets that field will meet head on, or even if they try to avoid it, they're going to have that problem. And then how could research close that gap? And so as I've learned more about university life here in the last 10 years in research, more about FEMA's Region 6 higher ed collaborative, I said, man, there's a gap that I think I can help fill. Is how do I bring these researchers that are looking for problem sets to solve that someone else would, one is appreciate, one will find useful, and try to connect them to practitioners. So I've taken that role for our higher ed collaborative effort is, how do we organize that? How do we get the word out? How do we get more researchers with different diverse backgrounds and interests into the fold? But then how do we let practitioners know that we exist and there's that interest? And so right now, my main effort has been working with the state of Texas, with the emergency management office in the state of Texas. It's kind of a jump off point. And then my intent then is to move on to the remaining states within Region 6. Because each state, as I realized through my experiences with Department of Homeland Security, each state has a DHS office. And so that becomes the logical and reasonable spot to kind of jump off to do this. And to be able to just connect, the idea of connecting researchers within the collaborative effort and practitioners. If you combine that with the training or the development, professional development of emergency management officials, it just becomes a win-win for anyone in that profession, anyone doing the research, and quite honestly, the communities that we all serve. And so in retirement, I've got choices, right? This is my retirement job. And so in retirement, I've got choices, and chose to do something that hopefully will have an impact to a greater scope of folks. And I find this a very interesting niche, a fascinating field that I hope to help grow.
Fantastic. I remember sitting there at UTEP for the summit that you hosted, and just being amazed by the amount of research that was being done there and at other universities that came in and presented as well. And one of the things, I was sitting there with also the higher ed program manager from FEMA headquarters at the time, who has since moved on. But I got the idea that the presenters were hoping that we might be able to provide some sort of grant funding, which of course the Region 6 Higher Education Collaborative does not handle grant funding. But do you see us moving towards a place where we're more likely to be able to identify grant funding streams for those in the collaborative? Do you see, I asked that question knowing that David Leyva, an academic advisor from the recovery end of recovery, of FEMA, who has been a part of this group, has indicated that he knows that folks are hungry for grant funds and to marry up the research and the grants. And I'm hoping that maybe this group will be able to kind of focus on that and put those two things together. What's your feeling on that?
I think that the potential is there to move towards a stream of grant funding on that. But as I put this together and focus those efforts, it isn't so much a focus on the stream of funding, because there's funding throughout the Department of Homeland Security for these type of things. It doesn't have to necessarily be FEMA, but there is funding to be able to do that. And FEMA does put out some funding announcements on that. I think where we fall short with research is we don't understand. Sometimes we develop a special skill set, but it's geared for, let's say, something within the Department of Defense. Not understanding that if you kind of tweak that problem statement or the question you're trying to answer in research, because in research, all you're doing is trying to answer a research question. You tweak that question a little bit, all of a sudden you broaden the number of people who are interested in that type of work. And I think that becomes my basis is that funding's great, but even if there was a glut of funding right now, if researchers do not understand the problem statements that practitioners are dealing with, then the research becomes useless. It doesn't become, it's not practical and it's not useful for what we need, because I've learned at the university, that really there's two types of research. There's applied research that usually comes out, practitioners are looking for, what can you do for me now? And then you have the research that contributes to a body of knowledge and advances certain things. But my experiences with the Department of Homeland Security, and not just DHS, but multiple government agencies, is they're not really looking for state-of-the-art equipment or state-of-the-art of gadgets, trinkets, whatever the case may be, because no one will run them once researchers leave. What they want is what works now. I have a problem now on that. And so part of it is educating researchers first, is really like to start out with. Because in a perfect world, we get this collaborative, within the collaborative going, and what I would, my intention to lead with this research aspect is, as we start to build that membership in terms of who's interested in research, is to do a series of DHS 101s, right? Kind of big scale with a department, looking at the 9 operational components of DHS. What are their mission sets? Have a better understanding. Because once you have a better understanding, it's easier to develop a problem statement. And then within that problem statement, a question you can answer. And so when they're putting the proposals, research proposals for a grant, it becomes much stronger. Because the grantor is reading it and goes, God, they know FEMA. God, they know DHS. And if we can get to that point, then the grants will come.
Moving back to the Region 6 Higher Education Collaborative, I'd say we've been going about 3 years now, but we've been in overdrive in the last year or so that you've been the chair. I think you got your feet wet on it when you hosted the Region 6 Higher Education Collaborative, which I believe, much like the last Community Preparedness Working Group meeting, was hosted at Arkansas Tech right before the pandemic started. So what was your experience at the Region 6 Higher Education Collaborative meeting that y'all hosted there at Arkansas Tech in Russellville, Arkansas? And how do you see it? How do you see it moving forward as chair now?
As you know, there have been 2 other collaboratives that had occurred prior to it being hosted by Arkansas Tech University. And it was hosted in October, and it was, for us, the ability to have our students join us in physical form at that meeting was tremendous. I mean, we love the ability for our students to really meet with other academicians, as well as, and probably more as important as, practitioners and researchers. So that was a huge plus to us to be able to host that, as well as it was so good to be able to offer our campus to others, for others to get to know what Arkansas Tech University might be able to offer within the sphere of the collaborative. I think the collaborative, what's so unique about this is that we have said, as institutions of higher learning, this is important to make certain that our region is prepared for disaster, and that we are encouraging those who are researchers to research and to share that knowledge with all of us, not just to keep it in-house, not just for the
article that's going to be published in a peer-reviewed journal, but to be able to come back and share that with us, with us who teach in the classroom, with us who are practitioners out in the field, with students who are learning about this whole area of emergency management. I want my vision, which has been wonderful to have these companions with those of y'all who are part of this collaborative, is that we would really be there to encourage each other and to encourage the next generation of emergency managers, making certain that they have the knowledge and the education, as well as the training that they need to do this really important work in the world.
Well, and that seems to have, each your vice chair, Vic Manjarez, and your secretary, Andy Smith, have all kind of carved out your specific roles moving forward. And of course, Vic's handling research, as we'll hear in this podcast. And Andy is really covering campus preparedness. And you, I believe your real goal is to match the research with the the practitioner with the
right.
researcher.
Make a certain theory and practice, because research informs theory, right? And therefore that informs our practice, how we do what we do. And theory informs research. I mean, you could see it as a triangle, but I would not say that one part of that triangle is more important than any other part, and it's informing each other all the time.
Sure. Well, and I would say that, again, just in the last 6 months, we've seen some changes in our membership in the growth, and it seems like that's moving toward exactly what you're wanting to do, which we've got more practitioners, we've got more researchers. I've been amazed. I think we're up to somewhere around 65, 70 members. And it seems to be that we're starting to pull in the folks. And, it's been a slow grind over the last 3 years. We've just steadily chugged along. And it seems like now we're getting folks from the state emergency management offices. We've got other folks from the regions that are wanting to be involved. I think we're sooner or later going to be getting county emergency managers maybe involved. And we're getting the researchers from not just the highbrow, everybody knows them universities, which is great. We're glad to have that. But it seems like we're pulling in some community college folks, and just everybody is sharing the information with one another. And I think the opportunities are starting to really, really show up.
And that's most exciting.
Yeah,
that's happening.
Yeah. So what do you see as we move forward for the future? Where do you see this group going?
I don't know I don't see a limit to where we go, but I do think that one of them, probably our important piece, is not only to solidify what we are doing, which I feel like right now, I'm really excited about the collaborative, because I feel like we are working together. When we had our last meeting in September, it was like we had to cut it off, because we had said it's going to just be an hour. We went a little, for those who were able to stick around a little bit longer, we did, but we've got such high energy. But next is to make certain that we are advertising and sharing this good news, this opportunity, with other faculty, with other students, as well as other institutions. I mean, I look at the institutions that were there, and very few of us had any students participating. I think that's where we need to go. Next is to make certain that we've got them, but at the same time, we need to make certain that other institutions, all institutions in our area, are aware of this. They might not even have an emergency management program, but maybe they've got a CERT team. Maybe every campus has to be prepared for a disaster. So in some ways, I think all institutions of higher learning in this region should be vetted and connected with us. All could benefit from the research.
That about does it for this episode. We'd like to thank Laura Brown from Arkansas Tech University's Emergency Management Program for her assistance editing this podcast. And we'd like you, the listener, to give us a like if you're so inclined, and share us with somebody else that might want to help prepare their community. Until next time, take care of you and yours.